Evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Grief Talk. And again, we are talking about pregnancy and infant loss. And October 15th was the Awareness Day. And it's just, again, this is a grief talk that is just honoring all those who have lost a child through pregnancy or through when they were an infant. So just for all the mothers and fathers and all the grandparents and anybody else, siblings who have been impacted, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tonight we have with us Raelene Alicto and Kate Baltazar-Dodge, who are both grief recovery specialists. Kate is an advanced grief recovery specialist, and they're going to be sharing their stories with you a little later. So just to ensure that we are moving right along, a disclaimer for the grief recovery specialists: we are not counselors, nor we are therapists or licensed clinicians. We are certified grief recovery specialists, trained and certified by the Grief Recovery Institute. If you have any questions and you're not familiar with the Grief Recovery Institute, I invite you to just type that in your browser when you get a chance to and learn a little bit about what the Grief Recovery Institute has to offer, and how, again, we are so passionate about bringing this work out here to the islands. Just to set some safety perimeters this evening, some of the commitments, again, that I would like to ask are basically just here up on the screen. Confidentiality. The ladies are going to be sharing some very deep emotional stories, how their lives have been impacted by child loss. And the other specialists may also be sharing. So we want to ask that you honor that confidentiality. I mean, it's going to be aired out on Facebook, and it's going to be shared. But again, it's just honoring the individual stories. We ask that you also keep an open mind. Keep an open mind. Some of the information we're going to share tonight may help you to reflect on maybe your own experiences. It may trigger some emotions, and that's completely okay, but we just ask that you keep an open mind. I always like to say, take what is helpful away with you tonight, what you can use for yourself and what you can share with others. And if it's not so much as helpful to you, then you can leave it right on this platform. No judging others or self. That's one of the things that we have learned to adjust to, because in today's world, it's just so easy for all of us to judge and, blame other people, especially in this pandemic that we are experiencing. Tonight, we're just asking, no judging. Stories are going to be shared. There may be questions that are going to be asked from participants at the end. Again, other grief recovery specialists. Don't judge them. And also yourselves. If you are feeling compelled to crying, if you are, feeling a bit emotional, if you are a little confused, uncertain, just don't judge yourself and be in that moment. And then we'll help you through that. We'll help you navigate through some of that as the ladies share their stories and answer some of the questions. No comparing losses. What this does is it robs the joy off of each person's journey, off of each person's life experience. What that does is it minimizes your own story of loss. And what I mean by that is sometimes we are maybe not very aware, but when we are going through a loss, we think about our loss and we may say things like, well, at least my life is not as bad as someone else's life, or my experience is not as bad as somebody else's experience. Or we say, wow, they are going through just a colossal of an experience, and I would never want to ever experience that. And what that does is it minimizes that person's experience as an individual. So please, no comparing losses this evening. No apologizing for human feelings. Again, if you feel like crying with us, by all means, it is a safe space to do so. If you feel like laughing with us, again, you can laugh. Whatever emotions that you are going through, whatever feelings you are experiencing at the moment, be in that. We encourage it, okay? At the end of this grief talk, we're going to be able to open the chat for questions. So if there's any questions that you may already have that's kind of like pressing and you want that to get answered, don't hesitate to type that in the chat box. Bobby is going to be, Bobby Taitano, who is one of the other grief recovery specialists, will be the question moderator. So at the end of the session, she'll be going through the questions to ensure that all the questions get addressed. So just want to go ahead and introduce some of the grief recovery specialists that's on here. And please, ladies, if for the sake of me not being able to see, who's on. I'm going to go ahead and look at the participants so I can make sure I'm acknowledging everyone. Darlene Garcia, who is also an advanced grief recovery specialist, and right now she is in Canada. She is joining us this evening. Bobby Taitano, who is also, you're going to be hearing from her at the end. She will be the moderator for the questions. Of course, Kate Baltazar-Dodge, who is one of the panelists, along with Raelene Alicto and Marcella Takai. Okay, that's everybody. So thank you so much again, ladies. So moving right along, before we go into just the ladies sharing their stories, we're going to talk to you about two words. And what that is the first one is trauma. We hear this a lot today, trauma. We talk about there's trauma triggers, trauma events. You hear it a lot in the mental health arena. And basically what trauma means is trauma is an event. It can be any event that causes psychological, physical, emotional, or mental harm, such as a death or abuse. A traumatic event could also be called a loss event. If someone dies, that's a loss. If someone was abused, that too is a loss. A loss of trust, whether you want to call the event trauma or a loss is okay, but the result of a traumatic event is grief. What does grief mean? Grief is the normal and natural response to a loss. It's the conflicting emotions that result in the end of or change in a familiar pattern or behavior. Grief is the feeling of wishing things would have ended different, better, or more. Grief is the normal and natural feelings after a trauma. I would like to go ahead now and ask the two ladies, Raelene Alicto and Kate Baltazar-Dodge, to share their stories. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen sharing so we could see the ladies. So Raelene, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Michelle, for that introduction and for moderating tonight's grief talk. I want to welcome everyone tonight. Thank you for joining us. Again, this grief talk is honoring pregnancy and infant loss awareness. And this method has helped me a lot because I've recently lost a baby through miscarriage. It was my second pregnancy. After about 7 years, my spouse and I decided that it may be time for us to have another baby. My daughter was so ecstatic. She was 7 years old at the time, and again, I had never had a miscarriage in the past. I'm 27 years old, so that wasn't something that I was expecting. I carried the baby until about 12 weeks, where I went to my 3-month prenatal checkup, and the doctor could not locate the heartbeat. Prior to that, the month before, I had a prenatal checkup in which, my baby's heartbeat was strong, it was loud, everything was going smoothly. And so, I'll be talking a little bit more about how grief recovery has helped me through that loss, some of the things that I was challenged with, and how I was able to navigate my loss journey after losing my second child. So thank you again for joining us. And I do hope that you find some of this information helpful. Please don't hesitate to type in any questions that you may have, and we'll be happy to address those as best as we can for you. Thank you and welcome again. Over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Raelene. And thank you again, Sister Michelle, for moderating this very special grief talk. It's very, very heartwarming to see everyone. Welcome. I'm Kate Baltazar-Dodge. I'm an advanced grief recovery specialist, and I welcome all of you here today. Again, as Raelene said, we're honoring our stories of pregnancy and infant loss. And I know it probably took a lot of courage for you to be here today. So I honor that, I welcome that, and I hope that you find hope and comfort in this space. My story of pregnancy and infant loss began many years ago. I was 26 years old, and I had just married my college sweetheart. We had been together for many, many years, my entire college, well, whole time I was in college. We had just finished school and we're beginning our lives. We'd gotten married, and we're so ecstatic to announce to our family that we were about to have our first child. About 5.5 months in to the pregnancy, we lost our baby boy. And that was due to an obstetric condition that I didn't know I had. As much as we tried here on Guam, we just didn't have the specialty care. And year after year, for the next 3 years, we would lose 2 more premature baby boys. So we would give birth to them. We would hold them in our arms for about anywhere from several hours to several days, and then they would leave us. And there were so many feelings that came about, and which we will share momentarily. But most of all, there was just a lot of uncertainty and fear and anxiety. And through the grief recovery method, when I first became certified, it really brought me to a place to understand all of those things that happened so many years ago. If my first child were alive today, he would be about 16. And so it was 16, 17 years ago now. So I hope that you find comfort. Again, I welcome all of you. I hold each of you in my heart as we go through this information and share our stories.
Thank you, ladies. I'm giving you a really tight hug right now. Thank you for your bravery just to come out here and share this, because I know that, like, again, I don't have to experience it to want to understand that pain and that loss that you have experienced. And I think, even if the grief journeys are different and you and Ray have both lost a child, but there's absolutely no comparison to the reactions and how you guys, pretty much trek through that and where you're at right now in your lives today. So thank you for being able to just come and be a light. This is something that is hardly ever talked about. It's one of those things, when it happens, it gets swept under the carpet. And many times I really think that we really don't talk about it, just like we don't talk about other hard things, because we're afraid to say the wrong things. And so tonight, my hope is that, you'll be able to just share some of that vulnerability and some of those normal and natural, steps and maybe processes that you had experienced for all the other listeners that are here tonight, whatever their journey may be. So thank you so much. I know that with this here, and I'm going to I'm actually pulling up my file right now to ask you the questions. I believe that statistics show that 1 in 4 women experience pregnancy and infant loss. And, just living on a small island, I know more than 2 hands full of ladies that are very special to me that have lost babies during pregnancy or right after. My sister was one of them. And, it's very difficult to do it because there's love right from the knowing that you are pregnant. So the first question that I just wanted to ask you ladies is, what are some of the unhelpful things that you heard from well-meaning family members and friends following the loss of your child? Anyone can respond to that.
I can answer. So some of the things that I heard from well-meaning family and friends was, focus on what you have rather than what you don't have, right? You're lucky to have had your first child. That was another thing that was mentioned to me. And that one really, really broke my heart. It really hurt me because I think with miscarriage, it's such a lonely journey. Again, from the moment of inception, right? A mother develops a relationship with her unborn child almost immediately. And it's very different even from the relationship that a father might have from his unborn child. Statistics say that usually men form a bond with their unborn child when they first feel the baby move in the tummy, right? And so my baby was so small. He or she was so tiny. I felt like I was really alone in my relationship with my baby. So those were some of the things that that were mentioned. Encouragement from family and friends to try again. That one was, it's hurtful in a sense because the relationship that I had with my unborn child was very unique. It was unique to that relationship. And so, for family and friends to encourage us to try again, I still had so much pain that I was dealing with, a lot of pain that I had to process. My heart was so broken. It was, I was discouraged. I felt very discouraged from trying again. And after all of the health issues that I experienced during the miscarriage, I was even physically afraid to try again. So some of the things that were mentioned to me were that, try again. Don't be upset. You have a child already. You're lucky to have been able to have a child in the first place. Focus on what you have rather than when you don't have. And a lot of these well-meaning comments, they were effort to help me feel better. But some of them, really hurt my feelings, and that I felt like it was an effort to try and get my focus and attention away from the loss that I was currently experiencing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ray. And just watching your journey while you were pregnant, it was just so amazing, and it was devastating to hear that news. So, and even as a trained individual, it was definitely, I had to think about, how do I reach out to you? How do I comfort you? Because no words, I'm sure, that were offered to you would ever be able to, replace that or take away that pain. So again, thank you so much. And Kate, did you have anything to add on to that?
Yes, like Raelene said, it's there. You're surrounded by people after each loss, who mean well. They're well intentioned and yet misinformed on how they approach, saying things, and they don't necessarily understand grief and loss, and so they would say things exactly like what Raelene said. They would say, "Well, you're young, and you could just make more babies. Like, you could just make more, or the one that always floored me was just practice. It's good to practice. And I would just be like, okay, are you kidding me? Like, I just buried my son. And uh it was also immediately after, telling me, you have to be strong for your husband, because he's not going to be very he also just, he didn't have a very good way of expressing uncomfortable feelings to begin with. And so that was the advice, from some of the elders, who would say, you have to be strong, because everybody, your husband's going to be really falling apart, and you just have to be strong. And make sure, you don't show anyone that you're falling apart. You if you're going to cry, go to your room and just fix your face before you come out. And it was those kinds of things, like exactly how we're saying, we they don't necessarily know what to say or how to comfort you, or that the things that are saying are so hurtful.
Absolutely. And that just goes back to the 6 myths of grief that we've learned through the Grief Recovery Institute. And as you're sitting there, I mean, as I'm sitting here listening to your stories and all of the feelings and reactions that you described, like, it resonates to this day with myself, right? With my own loss. And that's pretty much what happens when any type of loss takes place. Again, all those ill-informed and well-intentioned comments that mainly come from the head, right? Like, oh, don't worry, you'll have another child, you're still young. But little do they know that it was a devastating experience, which leads to the next question, because it's about belief systems, right? It's about the myths, our belief systems that we were conditioned to pretty much put into action and practice a lot of the different things. And Kate, you touched up on that. You touched up on being strong, and you touched up about grieving alone. And we've talked about in many other uh, virtual talks that we've had over the past that culturally, that's almost I want to say it's an acceptable survival mechanism, if you may, right? So the question now is, what are some of the belief systems you naturally referenced following the loss of your child or children? Kate, you could take that first if you like.
So of course, naturally, and what was more difficult was, my immediate family wasn't here, when all of this was happening. And so and I was so young at the time, it sounds like 26, sounds older, but at the time I just, really felt like um, I'm leaning on all of you to help me through, all of this stuff that I'm feeling, because one, I'm really, really sick. I was really, really sick. I had lost so much weight. I was anemic, and so I was feeling sick all the time. And so all of the things that I believed would help me through this grief is exactly what, I had mentioned. It was be strong, don't let anyone see that you're falling apart. um, Take care of your husband, make sure that he's fed and he sleeps well and he's okay, because men, they don't really know how to handle this stuff, because culturally it's like we women are stronger and we carry the family. And men are a little bit, when it comes to these kind of things like bad feelings, grieving, sadness, we have to make sure that they aren't affected, by this as much as possible. I remember, um, you know, even just during the funeral, it was like, have you checked if your husband's hungry? Have you checked if he needs something to drink? And so that was like how I felt my role had to be, and you put yourself last. You certainly are always expected to put others before you. And a very traditional family, and they believe that make sure your husband um is taken care of, because he's not going to handle this as well as you. You're a woman, you're strong. Women carry the family, and so you should not seem as affected, by this grief, by this sadness, and by this loss.
I can't imagine how alone you were feeling during those times, and trying to really, again, just keep all that weight on your shoulders. And even if it happened so many years ago, I'll never forget the very first time I heard your story. As you talked about it, it was like it just happened yesterday. So again, my heart is with you tonight, sister. Raelene, did you have anything to add on to that?
Sure. So some of the myths that we learn about in grief recovery, which I found, that were present in my belief system as I went through my loss, was grieving alone. The idea that time heals, right? So with grieving alone, although I was already a certified grief recovery specialist, my automatic resort was to want to be alone, right? And as a grief recovery specialist, we mentioned it earlier on, is it's really difficult to unlearn some of the things that we have learned, and we have been almost programmed to behave in certain ways all our life. And so initially, I wanted to be alone. I felt some hesitancy with, showing my emotions to my daughter, which is another myth, right? Be strong. So some of these things, even as a certified grief recovery specialist, I had to remember that these were the helpful things, right? And what I was doing was very unhelpful. Time heals. That's another belief that, others would say to me, right? Honey, it's just going to take some time. Just give it some time, give it some time. And we learn in grief recovery that time in and of itself does not heal, right? It's the actions that you take that helps you, navigate the feelings of loss. And for about a month after I lost my baby, I grieved alone. I grieved alone because my daughter had to go back to school. My other half had to return to work, because another thing that we suffered during our loss was financial burden. had my miscarriage around December of 2019. At that point, I had already used up all of my paid leave. So we were really at a crossroads financially, and my spouse was forced to go back to work. So as a result of that, I was physically alone. And that, you know, in that I was grieving alone. So about a month after I lost my baby, I reached out to one of my fellow grief recovery specialists and I said, I'm ready to do the work. My job at work is I work in the human resources division of the company I work for, and I assist women who are expecting babies. I take care of FMLA and I prepare their maternity leave packets. I help educate them about their benefits. So it's really difficult for me to find the courage to go back to work and do just that. So after a month, I reached out and I said, I'm ready to do the work. I did the work and it really did help me. It helped propel me toward my healing journey. It was the only reason I was able to go back to work and help other women through, managing of their FMLA and maternity leave. But yes, those were some of the belief systems that I even, it was like a reflex. It was a reflex for me. So yes, those are definitely myths and they were not helpful at all.
Thank you, Raelene. Thank you so much, ladies, for, sharing again some of the things that you had to because of the things that were put upon you, and your description of taking at least 1% responsibility for your healing and recovery. Again, that just really shows a lot of our listeners that they can also, whatever it is that they're experiencing right now, whether it's a pregnancy loss or an infant loss, or perhaps just financial difficulties. And when I was listening to you, you not only described a loss of someone that you love to death, but you talked about other losses. Ray, you talked about the physical presence of your husband when he went back to work, right? There was that loss of the companionship, maybe even the safety, loss of financial. There's some financial difficulty because a death is so unexpected. We don't ever plan to have this money in the bank account to give our loved ones a nice burial. So again, thank you so much. The next question, and I just want to invite our participants who are listening, if there are anything that you want to add to this, if you had some of your own belief systems that you may have been using, or if you had some of the things that were unhelpful that people had told you in the past, please type that into the chat group so we can share it with the whole platform. The next question, ladies, is we're going to talk a little bit about remove away from myths, which is the beliefs and the misinformation of grief. And we're going to talk a little bit about short-term energy relieving behaviors, or as we call it, which will be a buzzword for all the listeners tonight, STIRBs in short. So short-term energy relieving behaviors, right? And again, these are just actions or inactions that we take to kind of like mask, alleviate, avoid, or pretend that the pain doesn't exist when it truly does. So it's like putting a bandage over the wound, and it's a temporary fix. So ladies, what were some of the STIRBs you exhibited after the loss of your child?
I can answer. So STIRBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors. For the audience, this is some things that we do in excess of, right, to numb or avoid the pain that we're experiencing as a result of our losses. Some of the STIRBs that I engaged in after I found out that I lost my baby was smoking cigarettes. I was a smoker before I got pregnant. Of course, as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I stopped smoking. As soon as I found out I lost the baby, I was home from work. I had nobody around me. I just had cigarettes, and so I'd smoke. I wasn't really feeling too much of the alcohol. I drink occasionally, but I guess another STIRB would probably be not eating as much as I should have been. As I was pregnant, I was always sure to eat my 3 meals a day, eat as much as I could, right? I wanted to fatten myself up. I wanted to see my tummy grow as quickly as possible. But after I lost the baby, a part of me wasn't hungry anymore. And I just felt like every time I ate, I thought about the baby. I thought about the times that I would eat when I was pregnant, and that was a trigger for me. And so I avoided eating. Those are probably two of the harmful stirbs that I participated in as I was grieving.
For me, the stirbs were different each time. I think the first time, because again, I was all, like Ray was saying, I was always alone. I was alone a lot afterwards, and I would sometimes drink, just out of the blue. Um, I would binge watch TV. I would we didn't have Netflix back then, but we had like box sets of episodes of shows and stuff like that. So I would just go through all the DVDs and just watch TV. I would not eat. That was one of the things that I had lost a lot of weight. I was still feeling really sick. They discovered I had anemia. So, I just, eating made me feel sick. And so I didn't eat. And I, um, I also work became my stirb, I think. It was kind of a stirb slash myth where I ended up just keeping busy. Like I just took up a lot of things at work. I got on all the committees, I planned all the things, and as a naturally, the face that I was putting on anyway, which was like this bubbly, happy face, led people to believe that, maybe let's give Kate something to do, because, she needs something to do to keep her mind off of all those things. So work became my stirb. I just threw myself into my work, everything that I could do, any project I could take on. I think we were going through accreditation at the time and going through all these things. And so I just took it all on, grants, everything, just so that I wouldn't have to think about the loneliness I felt, the sadness, the loss. Because not only was I grieving the loss of my child, I was grieving the very slow and deep emptying from my marriage simultaneously. And that is something that I didn't realize until I did the method. Um, because while you're in the divorce, right, you're kind of going through it, and there's a lot of blame that can get thrown around. And it wasn't until I did the method that I realized at the same time we were losing babies, my husband and I were also losing ourselves, my sense of self, my sense of self-worth, um, our roles to each other, feeling inadequate, because oftentimes in our culture, we're judged, women are judged by how big and fat your babies are, or how healthy they are, how many babies you can have. And I couldn't have any babies. And um, so it was very much trying to numb all of those feelings, trying to suppress them all and push them all away. So it was working a lot. I did drink alone, which I found later on very dangerous, and binge watching TV, not eating, sleeping a lot, so those were kinds of the things that I was doing, thinking that those were going to help me get through my grief.
Thank you, ladies. And as we talk about the stirbs, and you hit so many of them, and sometimes we think that we are actually engaging in really good behavior that's going to be helpful. It's helping us to heal and recover. But again, I always say, if you do things in excess, and basically it's just kind of like distracting from one area to the other area, um, we need to stop ourselves. I did a lot of retail therapy when I was going through my grief journey, spending lots of money. Did it make me feel good? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, when I thought about it, I had buyer's remorse. And then I didn't feel good about myself because I was like, what am I doing? Like I'm wastefully spending all this money. Um, Another thing too is sometimes like I want to share it because I want to give a balance to the listeners that stirbs don't only have to be negative behaviors, because occasionally drinking alcohol, it's a social thing that we do. It's not dangerous if you're going to have one sip, right? Unless of course you're in recovery or you're going to have one drink. But now if it's a prolonged behavior, and again, it's used to escape the pain. And I know for a fact that when we are disturbing, when we are engaging in these behaviors, it's never because we want to hurt ourselves or we want to hurt other people. It's because we want to relieve ourselves of the pain, the emotional pain that we are experiencing. Yeah, so it can even be excessive exercising. I was a gym rat when I went through my loss journey. Lost 56 pounds in about 7 months, and everybody was, they're like cheering me on and rooting me on. And one person that kind of was like a little observant was like, hey, so I know you're doing all this great stuff, but how are you doing really? you know and Kate, you mentioned that it's like the mask that we wear every single day, and we kind of get up and we put ourselves together and we walk out and our hearts are so broken, and everybody kind of looks at us like we're strong because it's back to the myth. So with the disturbs, it could be both um, engaging in positive behaviors, but there could also be some of those self-destructive behavior. Again, too much of something, we need to question ourselves about that, right? And again, it's no fault of anyone, but for those of you who have friends and family who are maybe going through these different losses in life, and they are using alcohol and food and other things to basically help them through this, you might want to just check in with them and say, hey, how are you doing? I'm here to listen to you and see where you can go from there. So thanks for sharing those disturbs, ladies. The next question, and again, I just want to acknowledge in the chat, one of the belief systems that were offered was comments like, everything will be okay. You've been through so much. You can handle this. You're a strong person. Yeah. And I know like some of us, we're very spiritual, right? We have a very strong faith, especially on the island. I too, I'm a very spiritual person. But when I was in the midst of my grief, it was a little difficult to not question whether my higher power abandoned me at that moment, right? So sometimes we offer things like, don't worry, things are going to get better. Just have faith. God is in control. He's going to take care of everything. But to the griever, they might be saying, well, where was God when he took my baby away from me? So just some of the things we want to share with you, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, some of the things that have happened to us, and we want to just be able to share that with you because you are not alone. The next question, ladies, is, it's actually the last question. What are some tips or advice you can offer others who are or have experienced similar losses?
Well, I would say in GRM, we're taught that all losses are different and not to compare losses. I was thankful that while at the exact moment that everything was happening, I didn't have my parents with me. I did have a great support system. And thankfully, a very loving, supportive uh, group of aunts, and they were his aunts, my husband's aunts, who, for the most part, were very gentle, very loving. And so I would say that surround yourself with people who are what you need at that time. Sometimes out of obligation or out of what we think we have to do, the traditions, the customs, and the things that come along with grief and loss. But I would tell you that if you could, as much as possible, be around the people who can nurture and love you through it. Because that's truly how I got through it up until 17 years later when I did the grief recovery method myself. Practice a lot of self-care. That's really important because in hindsight, I wish that I had done that, and I have learned to do that over the years. Rest is self-care. Rest is not being lazy. Rest is not avoidance. Rest is not, being selfish. Rest is self-care. So get a lot of rest, take care of your body, drink lots of water, eat well, try to get a little bit of fresh air and sunshine if you can. And just little things. If you don't have to do all those things in the same day. If you can get out of bed and take a shower and put on a fresh set of clothes, just one step at a time, 1 foot at a time, at your pace. That's the other thing too, that because there are so many things associated with grief and loss, and in our case, funerals, all the things. I really felt like I was rushed through, all these things. Like, you have to be here, you have to be there, we have to prep for this, we have to prep for that. Auntie so-and-so's coming, uncle so-and-so's coming, they're going to drop this, you need to be out there to greet them, thank them, and you did this, for days. And but if you, as much as possible, go at your pace every day, even if it means that you are asking people to slow down for you. You're the mom, you have lost physically a human being, and there's nothing wrong with taking that time to practice self-care. Surround yourself with people as much as possible who are going to be loving, and who are going to let you cry, and who are going to be okay with you freaking out, you having a moment, an emotional outburst. I was very lucky to have had his aunts who were like, it's okay, baby, it's okay. Or like, I'm sorry, I'm such a mess. I'm sorry, I'm I'm in such a bad mood, and they're like, you don't have to be sorry. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't feel like doing this right now. And then, they're like, just go lay down. What do you want to do? You want to lay down? You want us to make you food? You want, and they really helped me get through with what I needed. And that was very much not like how a lot of people were at that time. So I'm grateful for that. So that would be my advice.
Thanks, Kate. Ray?
Thank you, Kate, for sharing. One of the things that I really had to remember was, as a culture, we are very strong people. And as traditional local women, we are very strong women. And one of the things that I found really difficult for me to do was allow others to help me. I remember after I lost my baby, my mom insisted that she come up to my house and do my laundry and clean up. And I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed to accept that kind of help. It's like, no, no one should be here washing my clothes, washing my husband's clothes, washing my daughter's clothes. That's my job. No one needs to be here sweeping my house, mopping my house. That's my job. There was a point where I had to stop and I had to remember what I learned in grief recovery. And that is being kind to myself. I had to be kind to myself. I had to learn how to be kind to myself. And one of the ways that I let that kindness in was accepting help from others. Even so much as financial help. I mean, my sister took out a loan because we were anticipating that I was going to pass my baby, and I was so fixed on cremating my baby so that I could have my baby's remains. Unfortunately, I had lost hopes, dreams, and expectations of that because I ended up having to get a D&C, so there was no baby to recover. But financial help, I mean, my sister stepped in and she borrowed a loan and she gave me the money in an envelope and she said, hey, here's $1,000, do what you need with it. I don't care what you do with it. I don't care if you go to Ross right now and spend it all on yourself. I don't care if you pay your daughter's tuition in advance. Do whatever you need to do. And it was so difficult for me to take that money, you guys, because my sister was struggling financially as well. But accepting help from others was something that grief recovery taught me was okay. Another thing that I would suggest is, setting healthy boundaries as well. Sometimes afterwards, right, there's so many people that are well-meaning. They want to come stop by your house, do certain things for you. Like Kate mentioned, auntie's coming, uncle's coming, get up and do this and do that, make your home ready for visitors. If you're not ready, then you're not ready. Set those healthy boundaries and says, hey, uncle, auntie, sis, bro, mom, dad, I'm not really feeling up to it today. I want to rest in. I'm a little tired. I'm kind of exhausted. Can we do this another time? So that was another thing that I practiced as well, was healthy boundaries. Um, Mostly being kind to myself is the one advice that I want to offer anyone going through a loss like this. As the mother, and because I carried the baby, and the baby was in my body, uh, there was a lot of remorse on my end. I worried about if there were things that I did that I didn't do, things I should have done, things that I shouldn't have done. Was it maybe that time that I bumped my back? Was it that time when, um, I forgot to drink water that day? I mean, there's so many things that go through your mind, with miscarriage and infant loss. I think that a lot of mothers share this in common, as blaming themselves, blaming yourself. I blamed myself. Um, you know, but it was no fault of mine. And if there was no intent to harm, then it was no fault of yours, right? There are some things that are unexplained, for reasons that are beyond us. But what's important is yourself, what you're feeling, and how you choose to go about this. So, another one of my advice is find someone to talk to that you can trust with how you're feeling. Sometimes it's difficult to talk to your spouse about it. I found that a little challenging as well, because again, going back to the myths, you want to give someone that their space, and in a sense, we're trying to encourage them to grieve alone, right? Let's give them their space. Let me give my husband his space. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to intrude. So sometimes it's difficult for two grieving people to talk to one another. Find someone outside that you may trust with how you're feeling and what you're going through, and share that openly. I found that in Darlene Garcia. I called her after I had gone through my miscarriage, and I said, I'm ready. But first, she actually reached out to me. So she kind of reached out and she said, "Hey, honey, how are you doing?" And I said, "I'm not okay. Thanks for asking. I'm really not okay." So acknowledging what I felt was very detrimental, I believe, to my healing journey, and why I'm even here today talking to you about this. So thank you so much.
Again, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to give you guys a hug again. And for everybody else that's listening, hugs to all of you as well. Whatever emotions you're experiencing right now, I know for a fact, I moved to tears. I want to cry, but I want to also make sure that we move through this. And so I'm definitely managing that. But your stories are just, I want to say, not so much as, I mean, of course they're inspiring, but I think, like, for the most part, you shared your loss, you shared the journey, you shared yourselves, and you shared also, some of the things that you understand that people have offered to you that may not have been helpful, although they intended to. And the grace that you just are displaying here today, not only for the people that have impacted your lives and have been there to support you, but also on yourself. And that's my takeaway, because I think that's where we need to be reminded on a daily, right? It's so easy for others to forgive us, for us to forgive others. But when it comes to forgiving ourselves and practicing self-compassion, that's the hardest part. So thank you for that reminder this evening, ladies. We're going to go ahead now. The chat is open. We're going to have some time to just process what's going on. You have questions, go ahead and type that in the chat box at the moment. And Auntie Bobby Taitano will be sharing your questions so Raelene and Kate can respond to them. While everybody is thinking of their question, I had a question that I wanted to ask you. So here's the question. The question is, like, what would you tell people who are trying to be supportive to a woman who has maybe lost a child during pregnancy or, upon birth? What would you be able to offer up so that it'll be supportive.
I can answer that, Michelle. Thank you for that question. One of the things that I think culturally we are accustomed to is minding our own business, right? Sometimes when someone is going through a difficult time or they're in obvious distress, maybe we were raised to, look the other way, don't mind their business, don't mind their business. If we want to hear from you, we'll ask you, right? But as I was going through my loss, and I particularly remember the first day that I had gone back to work, I have a few of the employees on my social media. And so I think there was a good amount of people who knew that I had lost my baby. Again, there were 4 women pregnant at my place of work, and I was the one in 4. So also there were 3 other women who were pregnant who knew that I wasn't growing the same rate that they were. But one of the things that I really appreciated was people offering their condolences personally. And I know it's very uncomfortable. Like, how do I even go up and tell someone I'm sorry for their loss? Like, do I even have any business saying I'm sorry? Like, I don't even know how to look at this person. Like, I'm in so much pain for them. Like, how do I even look them in the eye and even bring that up? Like, what if they're trying to have a good day and I say it and I ruin their day, Because those were things that I thought about before my experiences. Like, I just wouldn't talk to the person that was grieving. I'd be like, oh, like, I don't even know what to say. But again, the myth of grieving alone, that's what we resort to, and others condone that. So, I would go in the elevator, and I remember particularly one employee, just kind of saying, I'm really sorry for your loss. And of course, that brought me to tears, right? But I felt much better. I felt much better being acknowledged and having condolences offered by one person than having 50 people walk by me and treating me like I was some kind of leper, like there was something wrong with me. So if you know someone who's experiencing a loss, reach out. Reach out and just say, hey, thinking about you today, sending you hugs, um, hoping you're okay, always here if you need to talk. Leave it open-ended, right? And, let that person know that you're always there for them. And when they're ready, I'm sure they'll remember who you are. So that was something that I appreciated.
Thank you so much, Raelene. Kate, is there anything you'd
I,
like to add to that?
I have to echo that as well. Sometimes we don't, we just tell them our condolences. I'm sorry for your loss. Reach out if you need anything. But what I would say is reach in, you know, if you know anyone who is experiencing this kind of loss, um, or if you yourself have experienced that, more so it's like a what to say, right? um it's always awkward, even as a GRM specialist, it's a little awkward. um and but I think that you should not let those barriers, like, I didn't really know them that well, or I only see them on Facebook now, or it's kind of like my sister's friend, that I just kind of know. I would say just reach in and really, and people will appreciate that sincerity, of course. um I had a really good work um uh, I had really good, like, work life balance back then, and surrounded by really amazing coworkers and colleagues. And so, that it was always touching to me when it was like their siblings, or, hey, my sister made cookies for you, or something like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's so thoughtful, people will really appreciate that thoughtfulness. And if you're, as I mentioned earlier, if you're experiencing loss, really, it is really important to at some point take action, because um, I think that's one of the things that even John W. James and Russell Friedman said when they were going through their losses. They didn't have the grief recovery method, and they never want anyone to feel like that again. Like they have nothing, no one, no course of action. Because in those losses, you're really looking around, saying, what do I do? I just want to feel better. I just want today to be better. I just want to be happy. I want to get on the other side of this huge brick wall. And, you know, at the time, you're facing the wall. You're like literally feeling like you're facing this wall. And I didn't even acknowledge it at the time, but so is my husband, and I mention him a lot because it has taken all this time and a lot of doing the work, doing grief recovery work, to understand, all of the things that led to the eventual demise of our marriage, but it started by not taking action for our loss, taking action for the feelings that we had. So I would say, take action. Don't be stuck in your grief. Reach out, especially to any one of us. You know us now. We're here. You see us. Um, don't isolate anymore. Don't it's like the 4 flat tires. Like we talk about this, and all the specialists know, if you get a flat tire and you're stuck on the side of the road, no matter how long you stand there and stare at your tire, like it's not going to get fixed. It's still going to be flat. Only until you get up, get your jack, or call somebody who has a jack, who has the tools, to fix that tire, will it get fixed? Will the situation get better? And then you feel better, and again, self-care is so important. I really made myself sick, not doing the things that I should have been doing to take care of myself, overextending myself emotionally and physically at the time. So really take good care of yourselves. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ladies, for answering that question. I know it's definitely helpful for me because, again, we just never know. And both of you defined how grief journeys are so unique, right? And we take a look at it. I want to ask all the participants, take a look at your thumbprints right now. Our grief journey is exactly like that. There's no two grief journeys alike. And as you see, Kate and Raelene have had maybe a similar experience in losing a children, but their grief journeys are so unique. And you've heard that in their stories. I believe we do have a question in the chat box. Auntie Bobby, you're on mute.
Okay, we do have a question. And the question is, are the stages of grief the same for everyone, regardless of the type of loss? And is isolation normal during grievance? Want me to read it again?
No, thank you, Auntie Bobby. I think I can provide an answer to that question. So are the stages of grief the same for everyone, regardless of the type of loss? So, it's very interesting that, and thank you for that question, Ms. Gina Garrido. What we learned in grief recovery is the stages of grief. So that was actually, it was actually created by Dr. Kubler-Ross. And that doctor, what she did was she interviewed terminally ill patients. And she came to the conclusion that the stages of grief were stages that were experienced by terminally ill patients, people who were, have received news that they were dying. The thing about grief is that grief is different from that, and that grief is not experienced in stages. So that's one thing that I'd like to share based on what we learned. Another thing I'd like to say to that question is that we mentioned earlier, right, that losses are unique to the individual, and we experience each loss at 100% for us. So maybe Kate might have had a stillborn baby, and I know my sister, who she also had a stillborn baby, but the grief journey and the loss is very, although similar, what the griever experiences as a result of that those losses are very different for each of these, for Kate and for my sister. And although again the loss is similar in nature, their grief journey is completely unique to them, much as your thumbprint is unique to you, right? And, you know, again, with not minimizing losses and comparing losses, is whatever you're going through, whatever a person is experiencing, they're experiencing it at 100% for them. So they're experiencing all of the emotions at 100%. It is painful for them. And that's what we know, and that's what we understand about grief. Your question about isolation being normal during grievance, again, referencing one of the 6 myths, right? One of the 6 myths that we have been taught is grieving alone. And so it's no surprise that when someone is in pain or grieving, initially, right, their natural response is to isolate themselves, and we refer to it as grieving alone. So it's very common. I wouldn't say normal, rather common, very common behavior when someone is grieving or feeling ill feelings. They want to isolate themselves, right? They want to be strong for others. They don't want to show other people what they're going through. And that's the one thing that we learn in grief recovery is, although we've practiced that all our life, it's actually very unhelpful. It's very unhelpful, and for some people can be very unhealthy. So I hope that I answered your questions. Kate, would you like to add to anything?
No, I was going to say, wow, that we should recorded that. I'm glad we're recording this because that was very well said. I was trying to remember, what is her name? Oh, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Like before I could even, I'm a little slow today. I think that was very well said, Ray. I can't add any more or less. That was very concise and accurate about both parts of that question.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gina. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free. You're welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ray. That was articulated in such a beautiful way, again, that just allows everybody to understand it. Are there any other questions? I'm going to take a moment just to give any of the participants an opportunity to type their questions, comments, just thoughts into the chat box. This is a safe space again. If you want to type it in privately to me, you may be able to do that, and we won't say your name. Okay, and it's okay to also practice silence and pause when you are listening to somebody who is talking about their loss and their grief, as well as yourself too. If you're sharing your grief story, your grief journey, it's really okay to pause. Well, thank you so much. I have just a couple of informative slides to show, and as I continue on with that, if a question or comment or feedback pops up in anyone's brain, heart, being this evening, please feel free to write that in the chat group, and we will definitely acknowledge it before we jump off the virtual grief talk. But again, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to screen share one more time. Okay, so the ladies that you just had the honor of listening to is Raelene Alicto, who is a certified grief recovery specialist. This is her email. You guys want to screenshot this screen, go ahead and do so. We also have Kate Baltazar-Dodge, who is an advanced grief recovery specialist. And I'll talk to you about the difference between the two different grief recovery specialists. So those are some of the contact information. If you have any questions that you wanna ask, this is how you can contact them. Additional resources. So tonight's focus again was on pregnancy and infant loss, but it's not limited to that. We talked about losses there were multiple losses that the ladies were sharing this evening. We talked about some of the things that we have learned growing up, some of the myths, as we call it, or misinformations of grief and how people handle it. We know that no man is an island, as cliche as that may sound. I absolutely agree with it. And what a better place than our own island and our own community, where we come out and we really provide support, right? And sometimes it may not be the best support that we want or we're expecting from another person, but when they're offering support, it's there. We also have some services and resources in the community where sometimes we just don't even want to talk to the people that we know. Sometimes we just want to, kind of speak our hearts out to a total stranger. And we're not going to do that just like right randomly out of the street. But we do have like the crisis hotline number that you can call. And that is 647-8833 or 34. And that is with the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. Also, if some people need counseling, some people need clinicians. Grief recovery is a resource. It's a service provided. It's an educational method that basically teaches grievers how the tools that's needed to continue or to start on their healing and recovery journey from the pain that these losses have caused them. Sometimes we need a little bit more than that, and you can reach some of the amazing counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists at the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center at 647-5440, and also ISA Psychological Services that is operated out at the University of Guam, and that is 735-2883. For those of you in Saipan, or if you know anyone in Saipan, please take these numbers down. The Community Guidance Center and Carry Dot, which I believe is a 24-hour number. And also, anywhere that you are able to call 1-800 number, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-TALK. There is a trained crisis counselor that will pick up the phone, be able to talk through some of the things that you're dealing with, and be able to connect you with some type of resource or support. And lastly, I want to talk to you about our programs. Again, at the end of the day, it's all about taking a look at what we are doing. I always like to ask grievers or people that are feeling, going through their grief journeys. One of the questions that I've learned to ask is, how are you feeling now? And many times they're going to say, it's not a good feeling. I feel so sad, and I feel angry, and I feel consumed, and I feel so confused. And I ask them, how do you want to feel? And they tell me, I want to start to feel joy. I want to feel relief from some of this pain. I want to feel like I'm not helpless and hopeless. And our programs can actually help you start to bring back that sense of joy and take away the despair, perhaps, that you're feeling. I too know what it feels like to be in a room filled with people who love me, who care for me, and who support me, but still felt like I was the only person in that room. And I felt so stuck. And little did I know that my helps and supports were just at arm's length, but my tunnel vision was so strong, I couldn't see anything after that. And I had to be reminded, because as John James said, the founder of Grief Recovery Institute, Russell Friedman, he says, he's the co-founder of the Institute, when your heart is broken, your brain doesn't work. And what happens is the intellectual part of our being kind of just automatically shuts down. And that's why it's difficult for us to get out of bed, to do the right things. We lose concentration, so on and so forth. Some of our programs that we offer, I'm going to talk about the first one, helping children online. So all of our programs we offer face-to-face, but right now, because of the pandemic, we have also adjusted our programs to be able to provide it on an online platform. Again, just for sense of safety and security. So the helping children online, the grief recovery specialist that's certified to do that at the moment is Darlene Garcia. So again, please, you can follow us on Facebook, Giving Grief a Voice, and you can inquire on any of our services. Helping children with loss or helping children with grief, we do not help kids. So we don't provide the services to children. We actually share the method with adults who are the caregivers of the child or children, which would be parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, counselors, teachers, any adult that plays a role in a child's life. This program may be for you if you'd like to help that individual. We also offer the 2-day personal workshop And I believe, please inquire again with Giving Grief a Voice. Darlene Garcia is the only one at the moment who is able to offer that. And I believe she is going to be scheduling some of these workshops in the months to come. So for inquiries, please follow us on Facebook. And lastly, the Grief Support Online is a one-on-one online grief support where we are able to teach the grief recovery method to grievers. And currently, there are several of us who are what we call advanced certified grief recovery specialists who are basically certified to teach this online. And that is Darlene Garcia, Kate Baltazar-Dodge, Bobby Taitano, and myself, Michelle Sasamoto. Please visit also the Grief Recovery Institute online, and you can actually pull up our names, type in our names on the site, and you'll be able to see our microsites with like a brief biography and some of the feedback that some of our grievers have left on our pages. So I invite you to join that. Let tonight be an opportunity where you will just reflect on what you've heard tonight. Take some time to allow it to make you feel those real feelings that maybe some of us have been burying. Some of us perhaps maybe have been feeling it by ourselves, right, with grieving alone. Or perhaps some of us are waiting for time to heal our wounds, which we know tonight from the ladies sharing that doesn't really happen. But really think about taking that 1% responsibility for your healing and for your recovery. And I wish I knew this grief recovery. I was introduced to it 4 years after I lost my husband to death. And I wish I had known it right from the beginning, because I would have avoided a lot of the misinformation that I was told. But please reach out to us. If there's anything that you're going to do after here, is take our Facebook page down and like it and be able to see some of the things that we're offering and some of the programs and just some of the things that we share, because maybe you don't need it, but you might know someone who needs it. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for sharing this opportunity to just be here, to be the light and love for a topic that is so difficult to talk about, infant and pregnancy loss, but just loss in general. And may I just go ahead and ask the speakers this evening, are there any last reflections that you may have?
Thank you, Michelle. I just, want to leave you with, a humble thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for allowing me to share my heart with you all, and, allowing me to share my story and my journey about my angel. I do want to leave you with this as well, is that, sometimes we're afraid to address the pain of our loss because we see it as letting go. And for some people, letting go, the fear of that is they don't want to forget about, the person, the child, the infant, their angels, right? But grief recovery, we are not here to tell you to let go. Or move on, right? That's another word. We just help you to conclude the painful loss, the painful emotional relationship that you might have. And that will actually, our hope is that when you remember your loved ones, you'll actually be able to remember them with more joy rather than pain. Okay, so thank you again for joining us. And I hope that you find comfort in our stories tonight.
Yes. Kate?
Thank you. I just want to thank all of you for being here, and thank you, Sis Michelle, for being so wonderful and nurturing in moderating and guiding us through sharing our stories, our hearts with everyone here. Again, I know it took a lot for you to be here, and it took even more for you to stay and stick this whole thing out. Honor your feelings, take a moment and think about all of the things that you might be feeling right now, memories that you might be having. If you want to laugh, if you want to cry, if you're angry, if you're sad, it's okay to not be okay. And I want to just leave you with this. My sister Darlene always said something, Darlene Garcia, she said something so profound. she said, there will be a point in time where grief and joy can sit together. And that's where we want all of us to be. Oftentimes we're grappling. Grief sits there, joy sits there. Then grief sits there and joy sits there. And we don't want to sit next to either of them sometimes.
Mhm.
But it's a really beautiful thing when grief and joy can sit together. Thank you.
Absolutely. I love that. And we feel that all the time when we're together, right? We're in a room filled with joy and pain, and it can coexist. It can coexist. Ladies, thank you so much again. I'm so moved by your stories. It's like I've heard it for the first time, but we haven't because of our relationship. And I just appreciate that even in your own losses and your own journeys, that you still have the passion and desire to let people know that they don't have to continue that pain longer than they need to, right? And to be able to find a way to start seeing that speck of light and hope again. So I appreciate that. I believe that pretty much summarizes our evening. And if there are no other questions, which there aren't in the chat, we're going to go ahead and close out. Auntie Bobby, thank you so much for being a wonderful question moderator. Again, for all the other specialists, Marcella, for just being the support, Darlene, being over in Canada, waking up at 4:30 a.m. Thank you for your dedication and your commitment to the Guam team. We hope to see all of you at our next Grief Talk. We are already in progress. It's a work in progress, and we'll let you know what that topic is going to be about and when that's going to air. We are trying our best to do a Grief Talk at least once a month moving forward on the virtual platform. We can only do so much of this. If you guys are, again, just contemplating to take a look at what our services are and see if we're a good fit for you. And when I say that, are we a good fit for you? Are you a good fit for us, right? Because we may be, and maybe you might need another type of service. But I always like to say that when you raise your awareness and you get information, it's going to allow you to make an educated decision moving forward. So thank you so much. Thank you for all your hearts, you guys. Thank you for your heart's work. We love you all on behalf of the Grief Recovery Guam and CNMI. Please continue to stay safe. Please continue to practice all of the safe distancing and wearing your mask. Sometimes we can be complacent, and it's a loss that we're adjusting to. But again, our main goal is to protect ourselves and the people we love. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, blessed evening. Adios, everybody.